Hello and welcome to the cutting room floor, where we dig deeper into last Sunday's message. So if you have any questions, if you were watching it, you watched it afterwards, you were there, whatever the case may be, we answer your questions first. So in the comments, first hit that subscribe, hit that invite, hit that no, not
Sure.
invite, share. That's what we want. Share to your homepage, the like button, but then also write a comment. Let us know where you're watching from and your questions from this last week. We talked about the church in Sardis, and we are working through Revelation. Next week we do Philadelphia, and then one more, and we are moving into the next phase after that of the book of Revelation. It's going to be, well, Johnny, let's give us a sneak peek. Where are we going right after the seven churches?
Well, we've been really zoomed in on the seven churches because obviously, like you've said in your sermons, they are applicable in the past, in the present, and in the future for all churches, the things we face. So we really wanted to dissect those intricately with a scalpel. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a big leap back. We're going to start flying 30,000 feet over and start um, consuming massive amounts of content based off of themes and like windows. Because a big part of Revelation, depending on your interpretation, is it linear? Are things happening one after another in time, or is it not what happened next, but what John saw next? So the next window we're going to look through after the churches is going to be the throne room. Then we'll go into the seals. Then we'll go into the bowls. Then we'll go into cosmic conflict. It's going to be wild.
Yeah, I I'm heading after I speak on Sunday, I'm heading out on a mission trip and I'm pulling all this content for the SEALs and I'm like, okay, when I'm on the plane, I'm gonna be on the plane for 16 hours.
Oh,
I'm gonna dig deep. I'm gonna go deep into the SEALs and try and really pull all that content into one message. We don't want to spend the rest of our life doing Revelation, so we're gonna do the main concepts as we go through there. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah.
Danielle, all right, you were there last Sunday. What was your biggest takeaway that you got out of the week?
I had a couple of big takeaways, but talking about muscles. We talked a lot about muscles and working them out. And you said something, and I quote, that if you are not strengthening your muscles, you are dying. Um, which was just really a big challenge for myself, because it's like I'll be the first to admit I get really lazy.
Yeah.
Phys- Physically and spiritually, really. But really it was just like encouraging and good reminder to be aware of that. If we're not strengthening our muscles, we go into fatigue and go
Yeah.
downhill pretty fast. So
Yeah.
I think that was just so important for us to reiterate. And then, even talking about it, I closed in prayer and I thought about it and I was just, sharing that like sometimes some of our muscles are really hard to work out. Like, for example, tithings and offerings. That's a muscle that, like, if I had to compare it to a physical muscle, I would say quads, because when you work out your quads the next day, you're just like walking around like very hard. So, on
That's a great
comparable
point.
terms,
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Whenever I do legs, the pain lasts a little bit longer than any other
yeah.
muscle. That's so true. And I could see that with giving. If you let up, because I'm pretty consistent in that area, but I bet that's a lot like that, where if you let up, it gets harder and harder
Hmm.
to even to try and catch up. I guess that would be even harder. Just trying to start again is hard, but to catch up from what you've not done, that amount grows. I have a buddy, he says he gives once a year and he calculates his entire total over the year and then does a 10% tithe off of the whole year's
Wow.
giving. And I was like, dude, that would be way harder. And he goes, I know, that's why we do it. And I'm like, so you actually want the pain. And he goes, yeah, I want the pain to know that this is costing something really big. And so when he does that check, it's like he knows it, he feels it. And I go, that's an interesting approach. I don't like that approach
That
at
is.
all. I don't like the approach at
I
all.
think
That's terrible. But
so. Even with the analogy we're using, I think sometimes the mistake we can make is like, imagine we're a gymnasium or a gym, and we want people to come and work out their muscles. We want people to give or to do these things. So we start saying, well, hey, we'll take the weight off of the rack, or hey, we'll make it so it's zero resistance. Well, they're not actually growing. They're
mm,
not.
Right.
My dad was the same way. He said, I do it in cash, and I walk it into the office and I do it, and I say, and he says something along like, I am excited to give to the Lord. Because that was like,
Hmm.
it was the actual pain of releasing his finances to the Lord's hand that actually reaped the benefit of being a joyful giver. I,
Yes.
for me personally, like giving has been a discipline in my life, but it's also been an automatic payment. So I feel like at some point I'm not even getting really the benefit except for just mentally knowing that the 10% of all of my income always goes to the Lord. But am I really experiencing the true benefit of that exercise if I'm trying to make the resistance as least as possible? It's an interesting idea. I don't know, but it's kind of what I thought of while you were saying that.
so you liked the way he was doing it, like once a year having all that pain?
I didn't say I liked it. I said I understand. Liking and understanding are different. But I can see what he's saying by
Yeah.
it means more to him.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Yeah.
and God doesn't need our money. He's looking at our heart. So a lot of our hearts are in a wrong place and we're checking off the box of the action. When God said, hey dude, but you're still you're greedy or your your faith is not growing or whatever thing giving is supposed to be working out of us, at some point that can stop happening if we make it too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So on the sermon on Sunday, I was thinking about really expanding the Sermon on the Mount, which I did a little bit, but there was a couple of subjects that I just ran out of time. Thinking that you're alive, but you're actually dead. And so that was like, okay, where's the place I can go for people who think they're alive, but they're really dead? Because I think the church is full of them. I'm not saying our church is full of them. I just think the church in general
In
is
general.
full of people who totally think they're good. I'm alive. I believe in Jesus, but they're not actually doing anything. And so I said, okay, where is that? So I went to the Sermon on the Mount and really dug into being the salt and the light. When salt goes bad and no longer is of use, it still looks like salt. It still even may, I don't know, it still has principles of salt, but it's not actually doing what salt is. Let's translate that because that's where I left it. I didn't do much more than that. How, as Christians, do we look like salt, but really don't do any of the principles of salt and what salt's supposed to do? What do you guys think?
Go, Danielle.
You got it,
Okay.
Daniela.
I think sometimes, as Christians, after a while, you get a little comfortable with where you're at, and then you become stagnant, even. You get to a place where you're almost treating your faith and your walk with the Lord as a check in the box versus like an actual relationship. And I see this, and like you said, Pastor Davis, not like, I'm not saying within our church, but just in the church in general, where people just attend church on a Sunday and say, that's a wrap, you know? Um, I attended, I did my dues, but it is so much more than that. Salt is so useful in so many ways. And I think I believe that with our faith as well too. Like it is so useful in so many ways. It is so beneficial to yourself. It is so beneficial to your community, your family, your surroundings. But it's not useful when you're not working it, when you're not tilling it, when you're not like putting it to use, when you're not seasoning your things. I remember we talked a couple of weeks ago about like seasoning our lives, you know. The Bible could be like the meat of it, but are you actually seasoning your meat? Which is putting in the work, putting in the time, putting in the relationship with the Lord? Or are you just gonna eat plain old meat, you know? So
Yeah.
kind of where
The
I'm
salt
going.
analogy is fascinating. If you think about how many things I watched a show, I forgot the name of it, but it was like a after the bombs drop kind of show. So you have almost like a civil war,
Mm,
and one of the sides had control of the salt mines, and so other groups were trying to fight them to get to the salt because it was so valuable. That was, I mean, there's so many analogies of you use salt. I'm working on a water purifier that's broken in my garage right now, and I took all the salt out and then put new salt in. The idea is the salt goes around these pipes to purify the water that comes into our home. Like the analogies of what we're supposed to be to this world and the
hmm
purification of who we are, and then the voice that we have to use to do that, because a lot of times see people go, well, that's why I'm screaming at people all the time that you're horrible. It's like, I don't know if that's the right voice, but and then you think about salt being used to eliminate ice on like when it's snowing, it takes away something that could hurt you. And then you think about salt, like you just said, as making food taste better. Like there's so many ways that salt is important in our world.
Useful, yeah.
And that's the analogy Jesus uses, saying you're supposed to be salt to this world. So maybe Johnny, push into it. I mean, Daniela nailed it. If you just come to church and think you're doing something, then that probably is the person who thinks they're alive but are actually dead. So what does it
Mm.
look like to be salt as a Christian to our world? What do you think, Johnny?
Um, the analogy that I like for my brain is when Adam and Eve were placed in the garden, they were given a job. And it was to tend to and work the garden. And so the the measure of that work and that effectiveness and operating in their design and their assignment was, are things growing? Are things becoming more healthy? Are there weren't weeds in the garden, but for our example, in our context, are the weeds getting plucked out of your garden? Is it being watered? So I look at that in my family. First and foremost, my primary ministry is my family. Or
Mm.
my daughters, well, first off, is my wife being inspired and challenged to grow in her relationship with Jesus because of my words, my actions. Am I verbally helping my wife understand the value of pursuing Jesus? And are my actions inspiring that and affirming those words? Step one. Then I go to my kids. Are my kids growing? Are my kids developing a love and a relationship for God? Are my daughters seeing what a godly man's supposed to look like? Are my daughters catching a vision of what the father heart of God is by my words and my choices? And then it moves out to my community. Are people's lives benefiting because of my investment of my words and my actions? Whether that your church, your workplace, each one of these circles, starting from your relationship with God to your spouse, to your kids, and then out, we know if they're benefiting because of us. And if they're not, then we're not being salty. We're not being a light. We are simply existing in cohabitation with them, but not affecting them or influencing them for the kingdom, preserving them, seasoning them, filtering and purifying them, whatever, right? Like you said, the usefulness of salt is incredible. But the point is, there is change happening. And granted, some of it is slow and some of it is invisible. That's where like faith walks in. You might be in a family unit where you feel like, man, nothing is happening, nothing ever will happen. But your obedience to be salty is still required of the Lord, and it is never ever wasted.
That's really good. Like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we talked about muscles part, which was really important. We talked about the salt and light and that aspect of it. And then I got into the books versus the book, the book of life. And I was actually surprised to see, especially given to this church, maybe it's going to come up more later. I haven't jumped too far ahead, but the idea that there is a ceremony with books based on what you did while you were here, and how there is this moment where you have a choice to go to that ceremony where your life's going to be judged based on books and all that you did here. Or you can skip it and go to the book of life. And if your name is in that book, it'll never be blotted out. And that's accepting Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior. And so most Christians are going to choose the second choice. But I'm just so fascinated, like what that's going to be like. I don't even know how you would answer this question, but what do you guys think that's going to be like? Where I'm like, how does that look? Do you guys have any insight on what like you've studied and seen or heard on what that's even going to look like?
Well, we know every knee is going to bow and every tongue is going to confess. So that means there is going to be a recognition of the righteous judgment of God. And so either it's going to be the most horrific moment of your existence, the most terrifying realization of all time, or you're going to just be so enraptured in gratitude because you're cognizant of these other books and the eternal consequence of them. And now you're being robed in the righteousness of Christ. And like you said, Jesus is being judged as your substitute, that you're going to spend eternity saying thank you, right? Um, the great white throne, the final judgment is, man, unfathomable of like that, what that moment, the weight of the gravity of that moment for people. Because it's not, at that point, it's not going to be like, there's not going to be any rebellion still. There's not going to be people like confused. Like everyone's going to know, and everyone's going to really, no one can say that he's unfair. Like that's one of the things it says in Revelation that he is the just judge, the perfect judge. The judgments that are going to be given are going to be absolutely fair. And so I just think that's pretty sobering because I think a lot of times we try to hide behind, well, I didn't know, or I didn't know this, or this, that, whatever. So
Right.
whatever his judgment is, which he gets to decide, what we do know is that it'll be received as fair and right.
Yeah.
Yeah, this scripture, as I was just reading it again, it says everyone will be before the throne. So everybody's going to have this moment.
Yeah.
There's no one that bypasses this. And then you're judged according to what you have done, unless you're in the book of life, then that changes everything. What do you think, Danielle? Have you heard anything about this?
Uh, no, I haven't. This was kind of like the first that I had heard of it, or you had presented it, and I had heard of it. But in like as I was processing and thinking about what you had said, like I was correlating it to being the salt and what happens when you know that like your name is in the book of life because there there is like a certain like your name could be in the book of life, but I'd imagine there's also going to be people that are gonna be like, "Oh, my name is in the book of life, so I'm good," you know? And then that
Do they
is
have
where
to say
you
it like that? Is that kind of the
exactly like with the hands and everything. But that's exactly where you lose your saltiness. That's
mm,
exactly where you lose your honestly, like your usefulness in the sense of being salt to the earth. Because like we were talking, there are so many useful ways to use salt, like seasoning, um, earth stuff, purifying. Salt is even used for like health issues. You know, when you have like a little cold sore in your mouth, you get told, oh, do a salt wash, you know? Um, there's so many ways to use salt, but what happens when you are just under the impression of like, oh, my name is in the book of the Bible or book of life, so I'm good. I've already accepted Jesus Christ. I will be forgiven. I will be done. That's where you start losing your saltiness. So I would say that just because your name is in the book of life doesn't mean that you stop doing the work here on earth. Um,
When
I
you
like
start,
that. I looked at, what'd you say, Johnny?
that's when you start the work. Yeah.
exactly. If anything, that's where you should use that as encouragement. Like my name is in the book of life. I gotta, I gotta be an example for those. I gotta show others what it means to be in the book of, or my name be written in the book of life, you know? Um, so when you accept Jesus Christ, I think my biggest encouragement is start being salty too.
Gotta be a little salty. Yeah, in the next church, because I'm working on that sermon right now, he speaks of a plumb line. And I think the what you're kind of saying is there's this pendulum swing where at first it's about, am I in the book of life? I don't
Mhm.
want to be in the judgment of my actions. Maybe I've been a great person, but I'm not perfect. So
Right.
I don't really want to go to that ceremony. So you swing into the book of life, but at that point, yeah, I like where you went with it. Then you might sort of stop and go, I'm in the book of life, therefore I'm good. And it's like, no, that's not where it ends. That's when
Exactly.
you have to think about salt and light. And you kind of swing all the way to there's a reward. I mean, it talks about rewards a lot in Revelation. So I guess there's another ceremony where I'm so fascinated by what this is all going to look like. Because you have this first ceremony that's terrible, and then the second ceremony that's exciting. You're in the book of life. And then there's a third ceremony of some type, and we get to talk about all this cool stuff that you did with your faith, with your salt, with your light. And something happens in that one too. We don't even, I think, understand like what that one's going to be like. It's probably the biggest celebration you've ever seen with drones and I don't know,
Fireworks.
fireworks and drones. Oh,
Yeah.
it's gonna be fascinating.
What one of the strategies of the enemy would be, I think you, me included, this is fresh language. First time I'm ever saying this. But a lot of Christians are living like we have something to lose, and we don't. Like we live like you're saying, Danielle, like I gotta make it to heaven, and I'm wondering if I'm gonna make it to heaven. And like Jesus came and took care of that part, and that is set and secure. And so now it's like now we're supposed to be activated to a life where that's why we see these apostles abandoning the white picket fence culture and
Hmm.
giving their life for the gospel because they had nothing to lose except for what did I spend my days being an effective salty person because I have been given such a gift in having my name written in this book of life and being in relationship with the creator and I've been called and I actually want other people to experience this. But when we live like we have something to lose, we're not living for others. We're living for ourselves. Living for gain. We're living for personal blessing. And that's not what we see in the Bible. That's not what we
Yeah.
see Jesus.
I thought where I thought you were going with it. So that's a really good language because what happens is when you accept Christ for the first time in your life, you can live to gain. And I thought that's where you were going to go with, we're not living to be worried about what we're going to lose. You were already losing. You were always losing. But when you accepted Christ, now there's this whole nother level of everything I do now matters,
Right.
has rewards and crowns and jewels. And I mean, it's like, what?
So that's what I'm saying. Like, so when he says store up treasures in heaven, like
Yeah.
you're these rewards, I say the human soul, it was never created to lose what I call heart treasure, which is rewards in heaven. Because where our our treasure is, there our heart is also, and that's where it's supposed to be. These rewards in heaven. We're living with nothing to lose because our treasure and our rewards are secured, and we're living for others. But where we get so caught up is it like if we live and we put our heart treasure in things that we can lose, like careers, identity, relationships, whatever, now we're wildly vulnerable. So this
Yeah.
Christian mindset has to switch to where I'm secure in this book and my rewards are secure in heaven and it cannot be lost. So I need to live for others. And at the same
Yeah.
time, I'm getting more rewards. So it's like, but we don't live this way. We live like we have to hold on to what we have here.
Right.
Hmm.
Careful. We have to be cautious.
Well, and like as you were talking right now, the first thing that came into my mind was First Corinthians 13:1, where the Bible just says, like, if I speak in tongues of men or of angels, but I don't have love, then I am just a noisy gong or like a noisy cymbal.
Yeah.
And Pastor David, in this week's sermon, one of the main points that you said was by being salt, you're loving your community and you're also loving your enemy. And
Mhm.
you're putting yourself in positions where you're going to have to struggle. You're going to have to fight. You're going to have to put yourself in uncomfortable positions. And that is love. We can say all of the good things that we want to say. We can be as loud as possible. We can be as open as possible with our faith. But if there is not love for our community, if there's no love, even for our enemy, which is one of the hardest things us humans can do, we're nothing but noisy cymbals.
Yeah.
And that's like where that's kind of how I was translating things. And then as we were talking about love, I was like, yeah, loving our community and loving our enemy, that's being salt too.
Well,
Yeah.
it says what credit is to you if you love those who love you?
Yeah.
Even the Christians do that. Like
Yeah.
literally, we haven't even started loving yet until we love somebody that hates us.
Yeah.
Right. Right. That's so it's just amazing how all the scripture comes together. The
Yeah.
so as I prepare for next week, we talk about the open door, and I didn't realize how many times open doors used throughout the Bible. How many times he speaks of God open this door and you have to step through it. And I don't want to get ahead, but it's just fascinating that he's always like we get to live now. We get to actually be used now. We have a purpose now. There's so much more when you accept Christ. It's like next level.
Mhm.
I'm excited about, I mentioned this in second service, but not first. The one of the mandates we're gonna do, or we call them we don't call them mandates. What do we call our things? Our Vision 2025.
I forget the word you use.
I forgot what word I used, but we're gonna be adopting streets. So
Mhm.
every family in our church will adopt a street that they're praying. They at least walk it once a week and pray for each home, get to know the neighbors, really take on the idea of being Christ in our community. I feel like that is being the hands and feet, living out all the stuff we're learning. I
Yeah.
can't wait. I almost want to do it now, but it's going to be one of our big goals for next year.
Nice.
It's gonna be cool. It's gonna be cool. Any final thoughts, Daniela?
Um, hey everyone, just be the salt of the earth.
Go be
Um,
salty. The
Yeah,
good kind
and
of salty.
and really, I'm just gonna say, like, if you come across this podcast and if you hear it, I just like truly want to challenge you to love on somebody that you might have a difficult time loving. Um, that is truly one of the best ways to share the love of Christ is even when you as a person think that somebody might not deserve that love, push yourself, offer it anyways, because that's being the salt of the earth.
That's right. Johnny, any final words?
Uh, uh, no, I got a whole other thing, but I don't want to open it up. So,
You got like a whole nother can of worms, is what you're saying?
worms. I was just thinking about how the missionaries in Haiti that just gave their life for Jesus, and
Yeah.
so many of the comments were they should have got out of there. What were they thinking? This could have been avoided. And to me, that just reflects, man, people aren't recognizing what a treasure that those people have now. Giving their life for the gospel, receiving a reward that far outweighs anything this world can offer, and people are saying, have less.
Yeah.
There's something here worth more, and like that's just not right. So
I was hanging with a group of buddies last night, and I was telling them about my mission trip I'm about to go on. And they go, dude, man, are you sure you want to do that? Like, that seems dangerous. And I go, if I die on the mission field, like, that would be my greatest. I would be so happy because I'm first of all, I'm ready to go right now. Like, God, you can take me today if you want. Second of all, to do it on a mission field with just the chance of possibility of I hate to say martyr because that's a little strong language, not very humble to say it. So I would just be like, that's the best scenario. Are you joking? You know what I mean?
Right, exactly.
But anyway, I don't know. If you're watching this, I didn't see many questions pop in. Remember that we are here to answer your questions. So when you have questions on Sunday morning, know that Tuesdays at 10, we pop on here to answer all those. So be sure to put them in the comments. We'll answer them later. Share this to others so they can hear just that deeper pushing into the word and all the questions that we have, because it really does bring up more and more questions as you go. And also, if you are in the Core School, Oakhurst, Fresno area and want to join us, we are on Sundays, 9 and 11, Yosemite Lakes Community Church. We'd love to see you there in person or online, 9 or 11. All right. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
See ya.